you guys doing today? It is the True Game Nerd here, and today I'm going to be taking a look at Smackdown. Here Comes the Pain for the PlayStation 2. Now, the Smackdown series have an interesting history to them. Going all the way back to the early games, WWF Raw and Attitude. Now, when I say early, I'm talking about early 3D games rather than things that we know today as old school. So, games were trying to be more realistic, more like the WWF Attitude feel. However, the moveset gameplay was often complicated and just honestly not fun to play. And so, taking a look at THQ, who did a lot of the WCW games, those games were often more successful. Oddly enough, their Thunder and Nitro series, which we all know from my previous reviews were not very good, were not the same as their N64 games, which were quite good. So it changed a lot of things. So Smackdown kind of goes back to that arcade style of gameplay, with some pretty decent graphics for its time. And of course, each game got progressively better. And when you move forward to Here Comes the Pain, Here Comes the Pain is important for a couple reasons. One is that it's different from any other Smackdown game. The other reason is that graphically it just went strides ahead of the other games and really kind of innovated the direction of the series. So as I'm talking about graphics, let's go ahead and look at the graphics. The graphics in Smackdown Here Comes the Pain are probably some of the best of that era. For a number of reasons. Anyone who's played the previous Smackdown games knows that things were a little more blocky, skin didn't really have texture, crowd movement, all that stuff was kind of looking more on the PS1 side. And after the disappointment of Just Bring It, and even the disappointment of Shut Your Mouth, this game really changes everything. The animations are a little more over the top. So moves done by guys like Brock Lesnar they look like they hurt. The wrestlers really do look like themselves, and to this day, when you watch some of the entrances, for instance, I think of Goldberg's entrance, they look just like the wrestlers. With that too comes a different presentation. The menus are a little more slick. They really showcase the character models, and even something that I caught that was a little different is when you actually scroll through the character selection screen, you no longer have real pictures of the wrestlers, but it showcases the render of the wrestlers, which I think is kind of neat. It gives it a little more of a video game kind of feel. Because the animations are a little cleaner, skin textures are really nice looking, and the crowd moves around more, the game really does feel more animated and slicker. Of course, the textures are a little darker, so the game feels like a little darker than the other games, and not in a bad way. There are minor things that bother me graphically in the game. Some of the animations do look a little bit silly, and maybe they've just aged. And some wrestlers, like John Cena, for instance, just looks kind of odd. They didn't really put as much effort in the lesser-known wrestlers, but that makes sense, as that's still a problem today. But aside from that, everything looks and feels great. Probably one of the better looking Smackdown games of this generation. Now as we move to the sound, that's where the game is both lacking and improved. So, being kind of the early predecessor of the Smackdown games, it continues the tradition of using music that's kind of just generic sounding, but it works for the gameplay. Fits the fast-paced gameplay of the game quite well. Most wrestlers have the real theme songs, although occasionally some of the wrestlers do not have the proper theme songs, mainly due to license issues. And it's a minor complaint, as it often just affects people like Stacy Keibler, who, to be honest, most of us aren't going to bother to play as Stacy Keibler. So, that being said, something that did bother me a little bit was the lack of commentary. And it only bothers me because graphically, when you're wrestling around the environment, you see guys like Jerry Lawler kind of walking around and stuff, or not walking around, but rather sitting down and talking with JR. Well, if there's no commentary, that's just odd. The other thing is that's a big part of wrestling, so when you take that away, it just isn't very good. That being said, in the previous games, commentary was pretty bad. What's is silly when you think about how some of the WWF Attitude games and the ECW Hardcore Revolution, I say Hardcore Revolution, but really I mean the ECW series of games actually have pretty decent commentary. It's a little bit unexcusable for this generation. So whatever the reason, the game could have really used commentary. And of course, a common complaint during the season mode is that there's no real dialogue. But at the same time, you have a lot more option as to where you want to go in the story for that reason. Whereas later in the series, like SmackDown vs. Raw 2006, you just get the same stories, and maybe if you do a couple things differently, you might get something else. Again, that's just a minor complaint on my part. Sound is still solid. Ring effects sound good. Crowd effects are good. It's just, it could really use some commentary and some voice work. Gameplay-wise, this is probably considered one of the most fun SmackDown games, probably of all time, at least in my opinion. Gameplay is fast and quick, so you really, it's all about reflexes. Again, with that arcade-style gameplay, matches are chaotic, movesets can be specific to the character. However, every character feels different, despite that the, how do I describe? So the control of the game uses the circle button to grapple, X to punch, triangle to run, R2 to block, L2 to block. So although each character technically has the same exact input, the moves differ from wrestler to wrestler. And in fact, you could even go into the create a wrestler mode and change already existing movesets, or create your own wrestler with his own specific entrance, moveset, everything. So every character feels distinctly different. The other thing that changed gameplay-wise is there's now a weight detection meter. So if you got a character that's 340 pounds, Eddie Guerrero is probably not going to be able to slam the character. And it really adds a lot to the gameplay, again, making every character feel distinct, and you get certain advantages and disadvantages. The other thing that got overhauled is the season mode, which, while I'm sad that you can't walk around anymore, you can still do everything you want to do. You can switch from show to show. You can choose if you want to ally with the McMahons or not. You can really control the direction of your character, and really portray if you want to be a heel or a babyface. Though the game does kind of push you to be a babyface towards the end of the game. The story mode goes all the way through WrestleMania, and there's a number of different ways you can play the game. I've played through the season mode probably 3 or 4 times in total, and I've been able to get a different type of story mode every time I've done it. So it's a lot of fun. That being said, despite how fun the gameplay is and how chaotic it can be, there are some really strange glitches in the game. And you can take what you will. I'm not going to dock them because some of the glitches are fun. I personally love stacking tables, and if you have a Game Shark, you can stack 12 tables. And, you know, honestly, the fact that it's a little glitchy makes the game fun. The hardcore matches are a blast. You can go anywhere in the arena. You can literally interact with pretty much everything. You can go on a motorcycle and drag people around. I mean, how could you not have fun with that? So the gameplay is amazing. It's like an arcadey, but kind of real simulation. They really nailed it with the gameplay. Fantastic. Now, of course, we talk about the presentation in the game. And I've pretty much said everything that could be said in regards to the presentation. The menus are really slick. It's trying to be a little bit futuristic. We covered the music. We covered pretty much everything about the presentation. If there was a couple things that are just minor complaints on my part that I had, is I know the game was in development for a long time. And so when we got the roster at the time that it came out, it was actually a little bit out of date, and that's a minor complaint, as that happened with a lot of games. WrestleMania 2000 was another one that was just like that. That being said, It really won't bother anyone of this era. It just bothered me at the time because, well, I was young and I really wanted a up-to-date roster. That being said, everything in the game from a presentation standpoint is WWE, and it's the Ruthless Aggression era. I don't have any complaints about the presentation. If the only thing I had to say that bothered me was if you look up footage, you would find out that Hulk Hogan was supposed to be in the game, Ultimate Warrior, and Jeff Hardy. And they removed all those characters for whatever reason because it was in development so long and legal issues. Some of the features featured in the trailer we didn't get, and that kind of bummed me out a little bit. But it's a minor complaint, and it really doesn't have that much to do with presentation. So, you know, great presentation. So overall, what do I think of Smackdown Here Comes the Pain? Well, on the positive side, the graphics are fantastic for the time. A lot of interaction in the season mode. You can really do anything you want. All the music from the wrestlers is there. Presentation is spot on. Gameplay is a blast. On the negative side, the gameplay can be a little glitchy, and we could have used some commentary. So all in all, great title by THQ. I'm going to give this game a 9.5 out of 10.